Your greatest contribution to humanity is your own self-realization. As you uplift yourself, you uplift everyone else around you. Nobody spends time with themselves. We depend completely on machines. We plug ourselves with a whole bunch of things to measure data, to see this, to see that. Why don't you just get rid of all that stuff and get to know your body, get to know your mind? If you don't spend any time doing that, how would you know what you want in life? We all want to be happy. Happiness should never be pursued, but rather pursue a lifestyle where the byproduct of that lifestyle results in happiness. I do that by being concentrated. Concentration is at the very core of all human endeavors and success, so that you can truly enjoy every experience in your life and be present. Young kids these days can only concentrate for a length of 7 seconds. How do you expect to solve problems in the world if your attention span is only 7 seconds?
Why are we ignoring the environment?
Because people are selfish. We have the most beautiful planet in the known galaxy, and yet we don't take care of it. Are we dumb or are we dumb? The way to start is to uplift human consciousness. When you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, how can I make a difference in the world today? We all need to help each other because we can't get through it alone.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... Imagine giving up all of your possessions, saying goodbye to all of your friends and family, and traveling to a far-off place to dedicate the rest of your life to being a monk. Well, that's what my guest this week has done, Dandapani. And he spent 10 years in a monastery in Hawaii with very few possessions, doing whatever his guru told him to do. And by doing so, he learned a lot about life, about what's important, about how to think, about how to sleep, about how to be a human. And he's back to teach us how we can be human in this crazy, plugged-in world that we now live in, where everything is on demand, whether it's food or entertainment or fun or friends. And he's here to show us that we need to simplify our life. We need to learn how to focus and concentrate. We need to worry about people pulling our energy away. And we also need to learn about money and how to use it and spend it and consider it. And I had a fascinating second conversation with Dandapani. This one does not disappoint. And at the very end, we really start getting into some personal things about him, how he sees the future of the world, his retreat he's building in Costa Rica, and how he feels about money. So I know you're going to really enjoy this episode with Dandapani, as did I. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dandapani, the Hindu priest, speaker, and entrepreneur. After graduating university with a degree in electrical engineering, you left it all behind to become a monk under the guidance of one of Hinduism's foremost spiritual leaders. For 10 years, you lived a life of serious personal discipline and daily training at your guru's cloistered monastery in Hawaii. When your vows expired, you opted to travel the world and teach ordinary people the spiritual tools you learned and how they can be applied in everyday life. Dandapani, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you, Brian. It's an honor to be back here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You know, we were here just under 3 years ago.
Yeah.
We had this incredible conversation, and it seems that a lot of people listen to it.
You know, Brian, I travel all around the world and I speak, and the one thing I consistently hear all the time, people come up to me and go, I heard about you on London Real, watched the London Real interview, changed my life, love it. So thank you for that.
Dude, my pleasure.
Yeah.
I was just so glad. It was two guys having a curious conversation about life and each other. It was
and
very
that's how
real.
it started, right?
Yeah.
And when we met in Napa.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had dinner together and had a long conversation.
Yeah, it was the same kind of thing, just continued.
Right, just continued in London.
Yeah, and we've already been having conversations about all different aspects of our life. And so I'd love today to just kind of continue where we left off and catch up a little bit.
And I might rant a little bit too.
Good.
That's okay.
I love the rants. I might rant a little bit too. I think we need to, and I want to cover a bunch of things today.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Tell me about what your world's been like the last couple of years and how, what do you do now with most of your time? Because you do travel the world really and teach, right?
Yep, I do. And, the rest of the time I'm home in New York and focusing on a couple of things, really trying to build up my online presence. I really do want to cut down a little bit on the traveling. I have a daughter now, a 6-month-old daughter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah, so I definitely want to spend more time with her and less time traveling. So I've been building up my online presence, building an app, and we're going to launch that hopefully in a month or so. And the app will deliver content on there, but one of the big features about the app is creating rituals. There's a whole ritual section. Because when I lived as a monk, it was all about rituals throughout the day, right? And a lot of times I think people have this misconception that, if you practice something in the morning, people say to me, Dandapani, if I practice meditation for 10 minutes every morning, is that going to affect my life? And be like, yes, but what are you doing the remaining 23 hours and 50 minutes? If you're doing things that counteract what you're doing in the morning, then it doesn't help. If you exercise for 10 minutes in the morning and the rest of the day you're eating, fish and chips and drinking beer and pizza, laying on the couch, it's not going to help. So the whole app is about helping people create rituals throughout the day. The same way that I have rituals in my life, and as a monk I was trained to have rituals. So I've been really focusing on that and creating proper content. Written my first book. I have a draft. Just finished it last Thursday, so
okay, congrats.
Yeah, so we're going to get that published hopefully sometime this year.
Okay.
And then our project in Costa Rica where we're building a retreat center.
And who is your typical client? Is it kind of the CEO of the up and coming tech startup? Is it sports people? Is it everyday people?
Yeah, my typical client that I work with in person is entrepreneurs. So they're entrepreneurs from small to large businesses, small meaning 10, 15 million or higher, and then people that own billion-dollar companies. So those are the people that I work with, and I also work with a couple of athletes as well, a couple of sports, very successful athletes. So,
what do they struggle with mostly? What's their biggest challenge usually when they come to see you?
I think it's interesting because the people I work with have kind of changed over the years. And I would say in the last 2-3 years, the people I worked with, what they really want to know is I think they've come to the realization that they know very little about the mind. They're experts in their areas, but they know very little about the mind, and they really want to understand the mind better so that they can leverage their mind to be even better at what they do. So they're either people that run finance companies or investors or entrepreneurs or tech entrepreneurs or whatever they are, businesses. I've got a whole range of them, and including some couple of the athletes that I work with as well. All of them want to leverage themselves better, and they feel like they have a lack of understanding of how their mind works, and that's one thing they approach me for, and the other thing is how do they develop concentration even more, and that's something that I always talk about is developing focus.
Now, how could those people not understand the mind? I mean, in this day and age, we've got access to all sorts of great YouTube videos, right? Including mine and yours. Yeah. We've got all this research. I mean, some of these people live in Silicon Valley. Yeah. How come they can't figure out the mind, and then they come to you to help them?
Because you don't know what you don't know. And the thing is, you can go and troll the web or YouTube, and you get bits and pieces here, but unless you have a structured approach to learning and someone guiding you and training you, you never really learn. Right, and you have an academy where you take people through a process, and that's so important, right? To have a teacher that walks you through it. And when I joined the monastery, my guru took me step by step. He was able to look at me and see what I needed next, pushed me in that area, challenged me here. But when you go on YouTube or you go online, you read a few things, you don't get the same effect, And I think a lot of these people want that. They want me to work with them and push them and highlight little things about their mind, so they can have that conversation with me and really refine it, and that's really what they're looking for. which is hard to get from 20 different YouTube videos.
Right.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about how, maybe these days people have a propensity when they go to learn something to kind of want to get the thing as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And some people, you were even telling me, they want to learn it so they can teach it as soon as possible, which, I mean, in your opinion, is kind of a flawed way to become a master.
Yeah.
Right? And you almost miss the whole concept of learning process. You miss the point of doing that. Can you talk about what you meant?
Yeah, so two things here, Brian. One is wanting a quick fix to learning. I spoke yesterday in Munich to a group of entrepreneurs, and we had a private fireside chat. I've been working with them for about 7 years, and so we had, there was about 15 of them in the room. We had a little fireplace. We were chatting, diving deep into some of the content they'd been learning with me. And one guy asked me, so is there a quick fix to having more energy in life? I'm like, there's no quick fix in life. That's the first thing you have to understand. And I think technology trains us to think they're quick fixes. So I can go on my phone, I live in New York City, I can order something on Amazon. Actually, last week I went on Amazon, ordered something at 10:30 at night, and the next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, FedEx buzzed my door and it was there. It's crazy, right? So I can get things instantaneously through technology, and then because we're so trained to getting things as soon as we want them, that we apply that to our life. And we think that, we can change overnight, and then people out there selling hacks. There's this hack, there's that hack, how are we gonna hack this, how are we gonna hack business, how are we gonna hack the mind, how are we gonna hack the body? But it doesn't work that way. You have a child, and your child is growing slowly and learning slowly. There's no way to hack your child. Can you make your 3-year-old boy, right? You have 3-year-old boy learn...
Walk faster, talk
faster. Walk
faster,
learn triple integrals by tomorrow. Why don't you hack him? It doesn't work, right? And then why as adults do we think we can hack everything? It's not sustainable, right? And then the other thing about being a teacher is that, that's another thing that's being sold out there. Besides hacking, it's like, let me certify you to be a yoga teacher. Let me certify you to be a life coach. I know you're 19 years old and you've never had any experiences in life, nor have you achieved anything that pushed you beyond the limits of your imagination, but let me certify you as a life coach after a 3-day weekend program. And I think when you go with the idea that I'm going to learn something and then take that content and teach it, you never really learn. When I went to the monastery and to learn from my guru, I went purely to be a student. First of all, I went there with the knowledge that I knew nothing. I wanted to learn from him, and then once I learned from him, my goal was to strive to implement everything as best as possible. I have zero intent to teach, right? And I feel when you take that approach, you learn the best. And some of the people that I work with purely have that approach. Right. They have zero intention to teach. They just really want to learn. And so when you go there with that intention, then you learn really well. Because then you're not thinking, because if you go thinking, I want to take this knowledge and teach it, then when you listen to the person speaking to you, the first thing you're going like, that's really good, that's interesting. I think I'm going to share it that way. I should really include that in chapter 5 of my course. Yes. And I think I'll add that little bit to this and then I can teach it that way. So then you're not processing, you're taking it, you're repackaging it, and you're thinking how to sell it or give it out again.
And that very much contrasts your experience in the monastery, which, first of all, the only reason you went is because you were massively inspired and moved by your guru. Yeah. And you were ready to pretty much give your life over for 10 years.
And I did.
And you did.
Yeah.
And even for 2 years, he made you wait until you could come.
Right.
And so first of all, you had a teacher that you chose as someone who pretty much lived the whole life and walked the walk.
He completely did.
Right.
Yeah. And then he made me wait, and he gave me so many challenges and tests along the way to see how serious I was as a student. And I did everything he told me to do.
What did he tell you to do? What were some of those things?
He told me to find my way from Perth, Western Australia to Hawaii. And I was a student in college, I had no money. So I went and got a job washing dishes in an airport, literally plane loads of dishes. So after I'd finished engineering classes, I'd go to the airport and work for 5-6 hours washing dishes, saving up money. He'd teach me how to concentrate, teach me how the mind works. We communicated over email, give me homework to do, give me tasks that were really painful, like coloring. I'm like, why am I coloring? I don't want to color pictures. But I just did everything. I trusted him. I trusted the process. I did the work and I fulfilled it, and I finished the work and I went back to him and I said, Gurudeva, it's done. What's next? You know.
And he wanted you to do these kind of seemingly mundane things.
Yeah, and I never complained about them, right? It seemed mundane, but I trusted him. He was my teacher, and if he told me to scrub the floor, I'd scrub the floor. You know, and I'd scrub it really well, better than he could imagine I could scrub it. And then I'd go and say it's done. And I might do a little bit more than I think I can. But nowadays people, like we were chatting earlier, you know, if someone wants to learn martial arts, they want to learn the quick swirl 360 kung fu kick in the air or something. You know, no one wants to go and do the hard work. And that's all about the quick fix. You know, how can I get from A to B as quickly as possible? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, these days people watch the UFC and they want to go to jiu-jitsu class and learn like the special gogoplata choke or the check hook in boxing. But if you go to an old school boxing coach, he'll literally make you do footwork for like a year, or throw a jab in the air for a year. And then, or you go, you know, to China and they'll have you, you know, stick your hands in sand for a year. They're waiting to see if you're willing to put in the time, and if you can maybe get to a quiet mental space as well, right?
Yes, and it's not only about training the body, it's about training the mind too, right? The mind needs to adjust, and the mind is like a muscle. It needs to reshape itself to be able to take on a new way of thinking and a new way of behaving, and, you know, progressively hold that new shape. And that only comes through repetition and patience and slow, hard work of doing the same thing over and over again. You know, one of my good friends is an Olympic gold medalist. She won the gold medal in beach volleyball. And she told me, and she had an amazing teacher, a coach, she said, and she said at one time the coach made her work on the volleyball court, do footwork for 6 months with no ball. So they trained for 6 months on the sand with no ball, and it was beach volleyball. Wow. And, you know, she did whatever her coach told her to do. She said she grumbled, but she did it. But that's the training that most people just don't want to go through, you know, and I think so many teachers out there are selling quick fixes, and because they have never been trained themselves properly, so they've got a quick fix learning to get from A to B, so then they go and teach a quick way to get from A to B. You know, they don't understand this old traditional path of slowly learning and developing yourself over a period of time is what really creates mastery in a certain level. In the monastery, living a celibate life in a cloistered monastery, away from your family, friends, your relatives, you know, waking up early in the morning, strict discipline and training, eating 3 meals a day, it takes 36 years before you're qualified as a teacher. 36 years. So if I lived only 10 years, I'm not even anywhere close to that. And I'm still a student.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me about this process of going to the monastery and being the monk, and, you know, what you learned kind of in retrospect by doing that whole process, you know, by separating from the world, and then those first few years. Because, you know, in our previous conversation, you know, you were talking about how it was very difficult stripping yourself away from all of these kind of worldly comforts and routines you had gotten used to. But then by doing so, it got your brain into a different space. And I think that's why people seek you out, because you come at things from a different angle and from a different perspective. And you're the first one to say, I'm not the guru, but you see things differently that we don't, because we didn't have to kind of sacrifice, I guess, in that way.
And, you know, I think the biggest thing for me is that I had such an amazing teacher. And, you know, my guru trained me remotely before I joined the monastery. And then when the first 3 years I lived with him, he trained me intensely. And unfortunately, he died 3 years after I joined, so I stayed for 7 more years. But in the 3 years that I was with him, he personally worked with me and really broke me, so to speak, broke all the patterns. And I'm not saying all the patterns, but definitely a great deal of them. And then helped me to recreate new patterns in my mind, and really taught me about my mind and how it works. And he showed and gave me tools. Right, he gave me enough homework that I could reincarnate for the next 5 more lives, and I still would struggle to accomplish all the work he's given me.
What kind of tools was he doing, and how was he breaking you?
By challenging me. So, for example,
And you're 23 at the time.
Yeah, 23 and a half.
Just came from Perth.
Yeah.
And now you're giving the next 10 years of your life to
Well,
this
I
man.
went in there for life. I never thought I would leave. My intention was to be a monk my whole life. I had no plans to leave, not be a monk, never. So after he died, 3 years later, it was a really difficult time for the monastery. There was only 27 monks, and everybody, 2 generations of monks, and everybody came there because of him. They were seeking self-realization, or they wanted to serve, but because of him, they joined that particular monastery to be his students. So in the 52 years of teaching, he had just 27 monks with him that he knew intimately, that he trained. And when he died, it was a great loss and a real difficult period. And I think within 2 years, we lost about 8 or 9 monks left. And, I stayed 7 more years, and I felt that, our paths weren't as aligned as it was before. So my vows expired, and I chose to leave. But I had no intention ever of wanting to leave the monastery. I would be, if he was alive, I'd still be there as a monk, for sure.
Wow.
So it wasn't that I went in there, I was going to do 10 years and then leave and go travel and teach. That was never my intention.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
so when I left, I was like, I had to do something now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so those first few years, he kind of goes to break you.
Yeah, and it's really about, he's able to, because he only had a few students, and he always wanted a few students so that he could understand you, right? If you have 20,000 students, you can't get to know them. But if you have 27, you can know each one intimately. So he got to know me, he got to understand me, he got to see my habits, my weaknesses. One thing, that he worked with me is to really teach me to be non-attached. So one way, all the monks lived in a hut that was 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet tall. So 4 walls, 2 windows, a door, just a futon mattress, a pillow, a blanket, and an oil lamp. No toilet, no electricity, no plumbing, nothing in there. And that was the big hut. Right, well, so 3 meters by 3 meters, that was considered the big hut. And I lived in one for a few months, and then he would move me to another place. He'd move me to an office, and he says, I want you to sleep here in the meeting room. And I'm like, okay. So I rolled up my futon mattress, and I went and slept in the meeting room. And I remember a giant centipede, like about 8 inches, falling from the air conditioning. I'd sleep under the air conditioning vent because it was Hawaii, it was warm, and wanted to be a little bit cool. I remember one fell on my chest and ran across my body. And so I'm just sleeping in the meeting room, and then I'd be there for a month with nowhere to put my stuff. I'd tuck it under a table somewhere, whatever clothes I had, robes I had. And then he'd move me into another little closet somewhere, in a little storeroom, and make me sleep in the storeroom. And then he would move me to a hut in the forest, which was only 3 feet wide and maybe 7 feet deep. And it was a metal sheet that was nailed on one side and folded across and nailed on the other side. So imagine a cylinder that's cut in half lengthwise. So if I sat in there on my butt, I'd have maybe about 3 inches between my head and the top of the roof.
Wow.
And I could crawl in and lay in it, but I couldn't sit up in it. I could sit cross-legged in it. And I stayed in there for a few months. And he just kept moving me every few weeks. That one I stayed 6 months, and then he'd move me somewhere else and move me. And then eventually I just realized, I had a few of his books, I had some beads, even in the monastery you end up collecting little things. And after moving a few times, it's just like, I don't want any of this stuff. I just had my robes, toothbrush, I'm good to go. And then he stopped moving me.
He was teaching you.
Yes. As soon as I realized, I don't need any of this stuff in my life, and I didn't complain about moving again, then he stopped moving me.
Interesting.
It was really interesting because I remember us being in my office one day, and I had a little room I worked in. He called me up one evening. He had gone to the beach to edit because he was writing a book. He was driving back with a couple of monks. He called me up. It was about 6-something at night, and he says, Dandapani, I want you to move to the wind bell for us. And that's where that little hut was on stilts, that was 3 feet high. And I said, oh, okay, Gurudeva, I'll move there tomorrow morning. And for him, there was no tomorrow. Everything is now. No, you can move there now. And it was already getting dark outside, and there's no freaking lights in the forest. And I said, it's getting dark outside. And he goes, but you have a flashlight, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And I just hung up the phone on him and, grabbed my flashlight ran to my current hut, grabbed all my stuff, and I went into this forest. And, there was this little tiny cylindrical hut in the forest that, I cleaned it out and had gone dusty and cobwebby because no one had lived in there for months or years. And I just pushed my things in there and crawled in there. That night you're sleeping and geckos would fall, get in there and run across your body and, you'd scream. But if a monk screams in the forest and there's no one there to hear him, did the monk scream?
That's a good question.
It's a good question, right?
So he's teaching you to also kind of disassociate from your body and your own comforts. And
your own comforts, right? You get used to being comfortable. And that's the problem, right? You stay in an apartment for long enough, you stay in a city for long enough, you're comfortable, you know where to go buy your milk, your bread, your surroundings, you get comfortable, you get used to it. And one of the biggest teachings he taught me is about awareness in the mind. You're not the mind, rather you're pure awareness traveling through different areas of the mind. And your goal is to take your awareness from your conscious mind, move it through the conscious mind, through the subconscious, into the superconscious areas of the mind, which is the most refined areas of your mind to experience deeper inner states and ultimately self-realization, God realization. But awareness travels in the mind, but when you get stuck physically in a certain place and you get used to your surroundings and your comforts, your external environment is a reflection of how your awareness is working in your mind. That means your awareness is stuck in a particular area of the mind because there's really no separation between your inner state and your outer state. And what he was teaching me is that by moving me around, making sure I never got comfortable long enough one place to stay attached, he was teaching me that to not allow my awareness to get stuck in a particular area of mind and in a particular area of the mind and stay in a rut. And that I could actually break my awareness free from a particular area of the mind, really grab hold of it and take it deep within myself and experience deeper states of mind and the superconscious and ultimately self-realization.
Which is what we're all looking for, right?
I don't know if it's everyone is looking for it, because I think people aren't aware what it is. They haven't defined it for themselves. But I think ultimately people are looking to have a better life and a better experience. And I doubt there are people out there that just want to be miserable. People want to be comfortable, they want to be happy, they want to be joyous. But are they looking for self-realization? I don't know.
But one thing that probably most people do suffer with is having their awareness associated with that outer self.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And, social media encourages that, right? I mean, if you go on most people's timelines, a lot of people's timeline, it's amazing. You can scroll through and it's just there's 1,000 posts and it's 999 pictures of themselves, selfies. And I think social media has made people extremely selfish and all people think about is themselves. Here's what I'm doing, look at me here, look at me there.
Which is the kind of the opposite of what being in a monastery is.
It's all about serving.
Right.
And you look at also public figures and celebrities and influencers, they constantly post pictures of themselves and their amazing life traveling all around the world. And, I know some of these people and they never post pictures of their students or, who's following them. It's always about them.
It's really about serving, but it's easy to lose that in this kind of hyper social media where we're all on our mobile phones. We have all that instant gratification.
Yep.
And yet without serving, you'll end up kind of having this really weird, miserable life.
It is all ultimately about serving and serving humanity and serving the environment. And you can't serve if you're always thinking about yourself. I get tons of messages on social media and email. People always saying, I need help. Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I have a problem. I need your help. Can you advise on this? I never get emails of anybody sending me and say, Dandapani, I listened to your content. It really helped me. Thank you so much. How can I be of service to you? What can I do for you? Wow, that's like, I'd fall over if I get any of those messages. And when I went to my guru, it was always, Gurudeva, what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I be of service? And sometimes I didn't even ask because I intuited what needed to be done next. And that's the state of responsiveness, right? As a monk, 3 qualities were really important to cultivate. humility, obedience, and responsiveness. Right? Humility, obedience, and responsiveness. Humility is the state of knowing that I don't know anything. You adopt the attitude that I am the beginning of the path. I know nothing. I'm super enthusiastic, and I want to learn and grow. Obedience is obedience to your teacher because you trust him or her, and also obedience to your superconscious mind, which is your intuitive mind. The greater knowing of your mind that knows everything, that's the area of your mind, the superconscious that knows, that's the all-knowing part of your mind. Be obedient to that superconscious. So when you get an intuitive flash that tells you, do this, which quite often people refer to as a gut feeling, I call it an intuition because the gut kind of is more related to your instinctive mind. So you're intuitive, be obedient to that.
What if that conflicts with what your master's telling you?
It doesn't. Because, I mean, if you have a good teacher, right? If you have a good teacher, then the teacher is also working from an intuitive state of mind, and that shouldn't conflict. And I never found a conflict with my teacher.
Right,
And
you
my
just didn't want to go sleep with the bugs, but you knew that there was no intuitive issue with that.
Yeah, there was no.
Okay.
It was my intellect that was pushing back and my instinctive. So if you broke the mind down to three parts, you would say there's the instinctive, the intellect, and the intuitive. So my intuitive mind knew that that was the right thing to do. The intellect was saying like, it's getting dark outside, I have to walk through the forest, can we do it in the morning? That's the intellect, it's reasoning. And the instinctive mind just said, no, I'm afraid to go live in the forest because some animal's gonna come eat me at night.
Right.
And there'll be a missing monk and who cares?
Right.
Right.
And usually your instinctive mind will be in disagreement with what your master teaches you. Because
totally.
Their job is to force you into the fears.
Right, because the instinctive mind likes the same thing. It's the nature of the animal mind, right? It loves repetition. The intellectual mind likes new things. That's why the intellectual mind can be fascinated with the internet and gets caught in the internet because it's always serving you something new online, whereas the instinctive mind loves repetition. That's why a cow, for example, is an instinctive animal. It can wake up every day and eat grass. It wakes up and goes like, oh, grass, amazing. It never gets up and goes like, God damn it, I want granola. Give me bacon and eggs today. No, it eat grass every day for 20 years and be totally happy with it. Imagine if we ate the same thing for breakfast every day for 20 years. We'd probably go like, no, like put something different on it, right? But the instinctive mind loves the same thing. And the instinctive mind staying in this hut, in the 10 by 10 foot hut, gets comfortable. It knows its surrounding, and that's what the instinctive mind wants, right? It wants familiarity. It wants everything to repeat itself in the right way. And when it does that, it feels safe and secure. Okay. And that's why, just to go slightly off topic a little bit, in the monastery and in the military, they have rituals and routines. Because if you look at the instinctive, intellectual, intuitive, one of the things you want to do is to make the instinctive mind be totally safe and secure. And by that, you create routines. Monks have routines, soldiers have routines. You feed them at the right time every day, right? When that happens, the instinctive mind of a soldier and of a monk becomes safe and comfortable. They don't have a fear and flight feeling. So now they can move out of the instinctive mind and function in the intellectual mind or the intuitive mind. So a soldier can go into battle and not live in the fear of the fight or flight area of the mind. And he can be in the intellectual area of the mind. So you see, I see the enemy coming this way. Maybe I'll go around this way and shoot him from the back.
Okay.
Right? Because if not, he's in the instinctive mind, he'll go, I'm gonna fight or I'm gonna run. And by creating routines and rituals, you make the instinctive mind feel secure and calm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the three parts of the mind. You want to talk about the intuition?
And responsiveness, so after you've got humility, obedience, when you hear your intuition speaking to you, the next step is be responsive. Respond, do something. If your teacher tells you to do something, go and do it. Respond, be responsiveness. And
Take
if you
action.
don't have to sometimes wait for instructions, if you see something on the floor that shouldn't be on the floor, pick it up. Don't wait for somebody to tell you to pick it up. Go do it, right? And that's the state monks were trained to have, the state of responsiveness. You see a dirty dish in the sink, go wash it. Yeah, it's not yours, I know, but wash it. Learn to serve.
Are these the three good traits of a good human as well?
I think so. Yeah, humility, obedience, and responsiveness. People hate the second one, obedience. Don't tell me what to do, right?
Yeah. Is that the ego coming out?
It is, right? People, it's like, don't tell me what to do, right? And people get so defensive, like, you can tell me what to do. I don't care. I have no big problem being told what to do. I'm happy to take instructions.
Right, and humility is hard for people.
Oh, very hard.
Because,
very
and along with the selfie generation is also this, everyone's an expert and the loudest voice wins and my opinion, now you can make a career off of an opinion.
You can. And all you have to do is post great pictures and, you see this beautiful timeline of, a highlight reel of somebody's life, and it's so easy to convince tens of thousands of people that you're an expert at something, with the right photos and some cute quotes, and people will believe that you're an expert. And then people look at me and I get messages and go like, Dandapani, you're an amazing sage. Wow, when did I become a sage?
You don't feel like a sage?
No, I'm not even a guru or a teacher. I like to think myself only as a student. A sage, what does Webster's dictionary define a sage as? Probably an enlightened human being. I don't feel like I'm an enlightened human being.
You're just 10 years ahead of us.
Oh, I wouldn't even say so. Maybe in a particular area because I've had training in it.
Right. In
the same way that I could say, you're 20 years ahead of me in interviewing people and knowing how to put a good show together, conversation. But that's your area that you've worked hard in training yourself. You spend decades and years working on this and refining it every day, talking to people, listening, seeing how we can do this better. Look at this beautiful space you've created. 3 years ago you were in a completely different space in a smaller office, and now I walk into this place and it looks so amazing.
Thank you.
You have bright souls working for you that are enthusiastic and happy with what they're doing. You have such an uplifting office space, and I mean, look what you've created in 3 years. What an accomplishment. Congratulations, Brian.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
I think what people find fascinating about you is that you went and did this thing for 10 years that most people would never do. Because it looks so difficult and committing and giving their life away. And then you came one of the few people to come out and then talk about it. And so I think you give us this perspective that in a weird way seems so obvious, and yet we can't figure out on our own because we're so busy with the distractions and serving the intellect with a Google search and posting our Instagrams and ordering our food on Deliveroo and going to the coffee shop. That for somehow we can't see the forest for the trees. Is that a decent assessment of?
Yeah, for sure. People don't take time out for themselves, right? And that's something I've been saying lately to a lot of people is that nobody spends time with themselves. And when I say this to people, they go like, oh, I have alone time. Every evening when I walk my dog for half an hour, that's my alone time. I go like, no, that's walking your dog. When I'm at the gym working out, that's my alone time. I go like, no, that's being at the gym. Alone time is you sitting down in a chair at home or on the floor, cross-legged, no music, no journal, no podcast, your eyes closed, and spending time in contemplation and reflection. Not meditation, but in actual reflection and really having a conversation with yourself, the same way we're having a conversation, getting to know each other and each other's opinions and thoughts. You have a conversation with yourself, and people don't do that. Right? They don't spend any time doing that. And if you don't spend any time doing that, how would you know what's important in your life, where are you struggling, and what you need to focus on next, and what you need to work on? You're so busy from the moment the alarm rings, they reach over to the side table, grab their phone, turn off the alarm, look at all their notifications, and then start stroking that phone. This is how people get pleasure in the morning, stroking their phone. Yeah.
And
right?
And then every 10 years, someone has a quote unquote midlife crisis when they realize that they're living the life that they've never contemplated, they've never planned, they're not connected with, right? And then that's kind of life. And then you're on your deathbed looking back saying, what did I do? Why did I value these things? Yeah. And they're wondering why, and it's because they never spent the time in solitude with themselves.
Do the work now so you can spend the rest of your life living a life that's in alignment with your purpose. Once you figure out what you want now and what your purpose in life is, then you can spend the rest of your life living a life in alignment with that purpose. And talking about deathbed, when my guru was dying, one of the last things he said on his deathbed was, "What an amazing life. I would not have traded it for anything in the world." What an amazing life. I would not have traded it for anything in the world. Now, what words to hear from a dying man? To be able to look back on your life and say, that was freaking spectacular.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, I've never actually heard of anyone saying that.
Yeah,
but I believe he said that.
Oh, and how many people could say that? And for me,
And why could he say that?
Because he lived in a life that was in alignment with his purpose. He knew clearly what he wanted. He was often, when he was 10 years old, he grew up in Lake Tahoe in Northern California. His mother died, I think, when he was 8, 9, and then his father died, and at 10 he was adopted by a close friend of the family. At 10 years old, she asked him, when she adopted him, "What do you want to do with your life?" I mean, what a question to ask a 10-year-old, right? And you know what his answer was? "I want to dance." And the people that trained him in dance in his early teen years were mystics from Europe. They not only taught him how to dance, but they taught him how the mind works, the body works, the nervous system. He had such strict discipline. And he shared with me a story once that he was in a class with a few teachers, with a teacher, with a few students learning, and there was a knock on the door. And the teacher opened the door, and there was a student at the door. And the student was 5 minutes late. And the teacher looked at the boy, this 11 or 12-year-old boy, I think, and said, "Obviously, you're not serious about learning." And he closed the door, and they never saw that student again. Old school, huh? But by the time my guru was about 16 or 17 years old, he was the premier dancer for the San Francisco Ballet Company. One of the best, if not the best, ballet dancer in America. And then he left, he jumped on the first ship to sail from America to India to pursue his enlightenment. But he was so clear what he wanted. He wanted self-realization, and then he spent some time in Sri Lanka, a few months, and then he finally felt that he could attain the self-realization he wanted. He gave away his belongings. He went into these caves called the Caves of Jelani in southern Sri Lanka in the jungles, and he promised himself he would fast and meditate till he attained enlightenment. He was this 19-year-old American boy in the late 1940s in a cave in southern Sri Lanka. So when you're so determined, when you're so clear what you want in life, and you're so determined to get it, and you're willing to give up everything and everyone for it, then you're living a life in alignment with your purpose, and then you can spend the rest of your life in sync with who you are, as opposed to chasing so many different things around you that sparkle, whether it's, I want to be like that person, and I want to do this, and that sounds fascinating, maybe I'll try that for a few years. You meet kids nowadays that are 18, 19, 20 years old, and you ask them, "What do you want to do? What are you studying at university?" "Oh, I think I'll do science and for a year, and then I might major in this, but I was also thinking I might take a year off, travel a little bit and then come back, and I'm not sure, maybe I'll do arts. I'm kind of interested in this topic." How do you not know what you want to do? We have one life. You don't get a second shot at this. Get clear what you want.
And how do you do that if you don't have the benefit of being able to go to a monastery where after a couple years of these routines and this lack of any type of comforts, you kind of have to figure it out, right? Or you kind of go crazy or you leave.
I would say, for the monks that came to the monastery, they already knew what they wanted before they came, because my guru wasn't accepting people that didn't know what they want. Okay. So you went to the monastery for the purpose of wanting to get self-realization or attain self-realization. So everyone that came in was already clear what their purpose in life is.
Okay.
The monastery was about training them for self. So for me, I was clear what my purpose in life when I was about 8, 9 years old. I knew exactly what I wanted.